am the newest advocate at Disability Rights Florida. I've been there about 7 months. Prior to that, I worked with adults. So I worked with adults at the Bayview Community Mental Health Center, also at South Florida Behavioral Health Network in Miami-Dade County. I had volunteered for the PAMI Council for years for Disability Rights Florida, and that's protection and advocacy for individuals with mental illness. And prior to all that, I managed the HIV/AIDS health education program at the health department in Fort Lauderdale. Most of my experience was working with adults prior to what I do now with Disability Rights Florida. So the program, really quick before I go into this, that I work with is AEO, which is Advocacy, Education, and Outreach. So we work with children in the schools with disabilities and advocate for their rights in the individual education plans in the schools. So Disability Rights Florida, we are get funding under 9 federal programs. We're a not-for-profit corporation since 1987. All of our services are free and confidential. We do information and referral, advocacy, legal representation and negotiation, investigations, and facility monitoring. That is more towards institutions. So state hospitals, prisons, jails. We're also monitoring the, in Homestead, there's like an Air Force base there. So all the children that are being held at the border are now there. Some of them are there, so we're monitoring that situation. And we give access to education, employment, and independence, and we try to eliminate any abuse and neglect. We have offices in Tallahassee, Tampa, Hollywood, Gainesville, and then we have satellite offices throughout the state. Our mission is to advance the quality of life, dignity, equality, self-determination, and freedom of choice for persons with disabilities through collaboration, education, and advocacy, as well as legal and legislative strategies. Okay, so we're going to go over the adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, trauma, the ACE questionnaire, health behaviors and conditions, how trauma affects children's learning, and resiliency. I first heard of ACEs about 8 years ago when I was working at South Florida Behavioral Health Network. I had never heard of it before that. And I was introduced to it from a woman that had been in jail. She had been incarcerated arrested, incarcerated probably about 38 times. And as she told her story, everything that was going on in her adult life, drug and alcohol abuse, poverty, substance abuse, exchanging sex for money, drugs to support her children a lot of the time, everything links back to her childhood and the different traumatic experiences that she had. Now, many of us have had trauma before the age of 18, and many of us suppress that. We send it down, we don't think about it, it will be gone. But a lot of times, it rears its head through physical complications. So this is what Dr. Vincent Felitti from Kaiser Permanente in San Diego, California, and Dr. Bob Anda with the Centers for Disease Control. They started working with individuals that had, first they were working with individuals that were obese. And these individuals would lose weight, they'd come back into the office, talk with the doctors, and they would often gain back the weight that they had lost. So the doctors would talk with them. Instead of like going over like, this is what you should be eating, this is what you need to do as far as exercise, they would talk to them about traumatic experiences in their childhood. And that's what was leading to a lot of their health issues. So they recruited all these participants in the mid-90s and have been following them to present to see what their health outcomes are. Am I blocking anyone's view? Just want to make sure. Okay. So the adverse childhood experiences are very common, and they're typically concealed and unrecognized. Unless we share those with someone, no one can really tell what I've been through. I don't know what you've been through in your childhood before the age of 18. So, like I said before, the mind may forget, but the body does not. These adverse childhood experiences are the main determinant of someone's health and social well-being. Okay, trauma. A deeply distressing and disturbing experience. There are 10 types of childhood trauma measured in the Adverse Childhood Experience Study. These include physical abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, physical neglect, emotional neglect. I want to say too, with the physical neglect and the emotional neglect, also abandonment is included in that, and I like to bring that up too, because if your parent, you have a parent that is incarcerated or has an addiction problem and they're not around, that is extremely traumatic. As a child, you have no idea. If they're not there, you think it's you. They don't want to be around me. You don't know what's going on with them. So that's kind of what I mentioned there, is a parent who's an alcoholic, a mother who's a victim of domestic violence. Also, really, a father can be a victim of domestic violence as well. A family member in jail, a family member diagnosed with a mental illness, and the disappearance of a parent through divorce, death, or abandonment. A lot of adults that I have worked with, they do not know their father. So that's really important to remember, because you're lacking that entire relationship. Okay, so what I'd like to do I'm going to go ahead and read the slide and then jump into the next one. As the number of ACEs, your adverse childhood experiences, increases, so does the risk for negative outcomes. Traumatic brain injury, fractures, burns, depression, anxiety, suicide, post-traumatic stress disorder, unintended pregnancy, complications with pregnancy, fetal death, HIV, STDs, sexually transmitted diseases, cancer, diabetes, alcohol, drug abuse, unsafe sex, and all these adverse childhood experiences also can affect your education, occupation, and income. What I'd like you to do is take a few minutes and complete the ACE questionnaire that you have. You're not going to reveal any of this. You're not going to talk about your own score or have to disclose anything. It's just for your own information, for your own knowledge. Do you have one? Oh, he was, okay. Let's see, I'm so sorry. Thank you for letting me know. guys need one? Yes. Okay. Yes.
We don't have a question that says, this comma, this comma. You have to have all of it. Okay, like for instance, you didn't have enough to eat or dirty clothes. They protect you. If it's just one of them, do you score yourself or not?
Just one.
Okay.
I have a question, if that's
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
I was wondering, because also, there's also medical trauma that hasn't, because like my son had cancer at 21 months. So even though the environment was loving and everything, this was out of our control.
Of course.
So he kind of lived with, this like so much in the hospital and all of the things.
Right.
And that's one of the trauma that's a lot overlooked many times.
Very true.
That's the medical aspect.
You're right. Yes.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of kinds. I'm just focusing really on the
on
ACEs.
those on the ones that are more like from someone else, right? Like abuse.
Well, but you would have to look at any of these questions, and
So that's for adverse child. Yeah, I guess it is in one sense. It's just one that you have no control over.
of course,
Yeah.
we don't have control over a lot of these. If you think about it, you guys, there is no blame in any of this. Okay, I'm gonna just disclose that my ACE score is very high, because I've experienced a lot of these. But I don't blame my parents now. I did for many years when I was younger. I was very angry, okay? But now, as I've matured, another way of saying I'm growing older, is I look at their life. What was going on in the world while they were growing up? My parents grew up in World War II. There was a lot happening. That may have had a lot to do with the way they were raised, okay? So parenting is the hardest job in the world. There's no guidebook, We all are triggered by different things that happen in our lives. We don't know when that's going to come up. When we're in relationships, a lot of times that person's trauma triggers something in us and vice versa. And that's something that we have to deal with in a relationship. It's just something to be conscious of, because when I first filled out my questionnaire, I was like, oh my gosh, I am going to have every single health problem there is, because I'm so much more susceptible to it. But what it did was show me that I need to start taking care of myself now. I need to start talking to a therapist. I need to talk to a professional. It's not enough to just talk to friends and things, because that's probably not, they're not going to force me to kind of deal with some of the things I need to. I need to really start eating right, working on some health issues, even if it's just walking. I need to keep going to my primary physician, go to my OBGYN every year, get my mammogram, all of these things that I had put off for so many years because I thought it's not important. It really is. It really is. So you just look at your own score and think about it as we go through the rest of the presentation. Okay? Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Yes, go ahead and change it. Okay. So this is why it was really scary for me when I saw my score. My score was way higher than 4. So compared to those with 0, okay? So just look at the qualifying statement. 240% greater risk of hepatitis, 390% more likely to have chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, 240% higher risk of an STD, twice as likely to be smokers, 12 times more likely to have attempted suicide, 7 times more likely to be an alcoholic. Those were just some of the first ones, the ones that kind of jumped out on from the page. Okay, so this is important and is related to us as children, and when we look at children's brains and how trauma can challenge the way that they learn, and probably the way that we learned when we were growing up, is during a stressful event, you have that fight or flight response, okay?
Freeze.
Or
She said,
freeze.
or freeze.
They know it.
Fight,
Oh,
flight,
freeze,
or
yeah,
freeze.
yes. So the stress hormone cortisol is released. So on your brain handout there, explain where the hypothalamic, I have one of these, is that this one?
Well, no.
No, I have a little
No.
sticker to remind me of where that hypothalamus was, or the hippocampus, but, oh well, we'll get through it. So cortisol is released, okay? When that stressor goes away, the nervous system kind of responds and returns the body back to normal. In a traumatic event, there is much more large amounts of stress, and excess cortisol is released, and it has negative effects on the brain, damaging certain neurons in the hippocampus. So the hippocampus is kind of right near the temporal lobe. And so I got this at a conference earlier in May, and I thought it was a really good way to look at the brain and identify the different lobes and, learn more about it. So the damage to the hippocampus impairs the child's ability to form new memories, which affects their ability to learn. What's interesting about this, and something that I experienced growing up, and maybe some of you can relate to it, is there was domestic violence in my home. I never knew what was going to happen every single night. So, get home from school, do my homework, but then the evening would come around and dinner. What kind of mood were my parents going to be in? What was going to happen? Was there going to be a fight that evening, or was it going to be a very loving evening? I like to describe my family as we fought hard and we loved really hard. So I always knew I was loved, but often the fights, the atmosphere was pretty out of control. So it was walking on eggshells, and there was this constant stressor that was going on. And oftentimes that constant stress is more difficult to deal with than a quick stress event, because the cortisol was excess and was constantly there, okay? So I had to study a lot growing up. I did pretty well in school, but it didn't come easy, okay? Next. So with children, because of this going on in their brains, they may have difficulty retaining information from verbal sources compared to visual sources. Okay? The trauma can affect sustained and focused attention. Symptoms of trauma can mimic problems including ADHD and other behavioral disorders. They may have difficulty forming relationships, poor self-regulation, negative thinking, executive functioning challenges. Anyone have any children or know kids with ADHD? Can you go back to the next one? Yes.
Yes, you
Yeah.
said anybody,
Mhm.
yes, I do.
Mhm. So it's interesting with ADHD is I saw a film at this conference I went to in May, and it had to do with the doctors and the ACEs study, and someone that they worked with. She used to see kids right outside of San Francisco, and it was not a rich area, okay? And parents would bring in their kids, and these were usually elementary, middle school, sometimes early high school. And she would say, my son or daughter is struggling with ADHD, not doing well in school. So many times, doctors are like, okay, let me prescribe this medication, and this must be going on, and you'll be fine. And many times in the schools, when I go into the IEP meetings, it's what kind of medication is your child on? Has he or she seen the doctor in a while? This and that. Well, what this doctor did in a community south of San Francisco is she talked to the child and asked them what was going on in their life, okay? And a lot of times these kids, they weren't just dealing with a parent who drinks once in a while. They may be, it's the same thing, walking on the eggshells. Maybe their father or mother drinks and they come home and they don't know if that night is just gonna be not drinking, one drink, or getting completely drunk and then deciding, I think I'm gonna take out my anger on my child. So kids are dealing with that. These days, I'm from South Florida, every single day, kids are getting shot in Miami-Dade County, okay? It's very, very sad, but it's also, people are just getting numb to it. The whole things with the guns and the shootings and everything. But imagine a child trying to go to school and concentrate, and at night you're hearing gunshots. You're worried about a parent coming home that's maybe under the influence of something, and you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if they're going to come in your room all of a sudden. You don't know if it's going to be a physical fight, if there's going to be some type of sexual behavior going on without someone's consent. So a child has all that going on, and then what if the family they don't have enough money for healthy food? So the child doesn't even have any food before they get to school, and that's how a lot of kids are, is that first meal is at school. Well, no wonder the child has ADHD. No wonder they can't concentrate. Well, what our society has done, though, it's take this pill. You watch television now, and there are drugs for everything, okay? We have forgotten about the ability to just talk to one another. And there's also that generational trauma that some of us have gone through, and that could be from our ancestors. Think of the Holocaust, okay? Think of Cubans that have come from a communist country. They haven't experienced freedom before. So our current administration is different, but previously they could flee their country and come to the USA. Prior to our current administration, individuals from around the world wanted to come to the USA for a better life, now there's a lot of trauma going on. I feel just as an adult too, you know? So it's just important to know about this and to talk about it, especially for those parents who are going to the schools and you're going into your IEP meetings. Don't give up on your child and advocating for them, and let the IEP team kind of direct you as far as what they want you to do, okay? That's where Disability Rights Florida comes in. If you ever need any advocacy, we go with the parents to the IEP meetings. So we know the federal law, and so we can often intercept what the school is doing and telling the parents, because the districts get money. They get money to take care of the children. And by federal law, they have to provide certain related services and supports at their cost. But often, they'll tell the parent, we don't have money for that. We can't do that. That doesn't matter. They have to, if they don't have it in their district, then they have to work with another district to bring that service over to their district so that that child can have that service. Did you have a question?
No, I just wanted to say that as a behavioral health consultant and somebody that works with child investigations, I completely agree on children not being medicated at such a young age. I've seen kids diagnosed and prescribed ADHD medication as young as 2 years old. That's ridiculous.
Right.
Completely ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those doctors should lose their licenses and everything. Yeah.
Well, what's sad too is I was in an IEP meeting 2 weeks ago, and on the in one section of it, it said that this was a 14-year-old girl, and it said she has experienced trauma before, but it has passed. Trauma doesn't just pass, okay? And when I saw that, I was like, and there's a school psychologist sitting there on the IEP team. There's a therapist that is part of her IEP team. That therapist sees her each week for 30 minutes. But what the student told me before the meeting was that even though it says that on her IEP plan, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And she can't even relate to the therapist. And the therapist just, what she told me she actually does is she works on coping strategies with her. But if you really don't trust the person and have a rapport with them, how are you going to open up about traumatic experiences that you've had in your life? And another thing is, does anyone in your IEP meeting, do the teachers, do the IEP team ask about the medication and when was the last time they went to the doctor and what they're taking and how many milligrams and everything? Yes? By federal law, they can't even talk about that.
Right. Oh, they used to ask me for a list of my children's meds.
Uh-huh. Right. Now, if there's certain ones that have to be administered on school grounds, that's different.
No, not
Okay.
at school.
So it's very important. If you have any problems, you hear of any problems, please call us. Okay. We have a 1-800 number at the end of the presentation, which you can call in. They'll do an intake. We travel all over the state. We advocate for you as long as it takes, okay? So we can stay with your child from middle school till they graduate in high school. We can work with the school to help get the transition services into the IEP, which the schools often do not even do, okay? you can start transition services by the age of 14. By law, they have to start by the age of 16.
And that's what they tell you. Is we gonna start them at 16.
Right.
Right
Okay.
or wrong.
So, this is kind of a funny story, so I went to an IEP meeting a few weeks ago, and this was a 17-year-old male. And while I'm waiting for it to start, in the school office where you sign in, there's this big like flag type of advertisement about their program, you know, about these on-the-job training, employment programs, and all these different, you know, cosmetology, gaming, you know, different interesting things that kids would be interested in doing. So when we get into the meeting, and it gets to the transition services part, and there's nothing written for this young man. I said, what are you all doing for him as far as transition? How are you working with him? What is the plan for when he graduates from high school, as far as helping him determine if he wants to go to college, if he wants to go to vocational technical college? What does he want to do? And they just looked at me. I says, have you talked to him about any of those careers that are on that like display in your office? And they said, what display? I said, the one that's right in your school office.
Wow, that's crazy.
No, we haven't talked about anything yet. Okay. I says, well, you know, you can work with the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. Yeah, we can give him that form. And so I asked the student, because I wanted him in there. And it's funny, because the IEP team, when you actually bring in the student, because, you know, when the students are like at the end of their middle school and they're going into high school, they communicate quite well about how they're doing, you know, what they want to do. And I encourage them to come into the meetings. The IEP team is like, is it okay? Are you sure you want to have them in here? And, you know, the parent and I were like, yes, they should be a part of this. This is their plan. Okay? So I asked the young man, what are your interests? What would you like to do? He's like, I like gaming and I'm an artist. And he showed all of us some of his artwork on his phone, and it was amazing. Like, he could be a graphic artist, he could start designing games, he could do animated movies. They knew none of this. They didn't know what his interests were at all. So, of course, in the fall, we're going to come back together and we're really going to work on those things. Anyone else want to share any interesting stories about? Yes.
Yeah, I have a grandnephew, and I go to the IEP meetings with his grandmother, who's his legal guardian, and we've been going to the IEP meetings for a number of years. And finally, just at some point, we asked for help in disability rights, and they have an advocate going with us now. So two IEP meetings ago, the team, pretty much led by the advocate, decided that there was certain testing that should be done in anticipation for the next IEP meeting. So then we had the next, and there was a series of maybe 4 or 5 evaluations. He hadn't been evaluated in 6 years, and he's 15. So all these evaluations were supposed to take place in the interim between the IEP meetings. We went to the second IEP meeting, and the district school personnel was there. The psychologist, I guess, the school psychologist was there. And he proceeded to tell us what tests they had administered and what the results were. And the advocate looked at me, she said, well, you haven't reported on this test or that test, 2 of the tests that were required by the IEP team. And he looked and he said, well, I talked about it with my supervisor, and we decided those tests would be worthless to do, and it would cost too much money, and it would duplicate this, that, and the other thing. The advocate looked him right in the eye and said, you had no business doing that. we told you what to do. And now they're going to have to spend the extra money outside their system to have those tests performed. But it was like a slap in the face to the school, and quite frankly, I was thrilled. Because, you know, once the team decides something's gonna happen, nobody else in the school system will say, well, I'm sorry, we didn't think that was worth it. It was just a wonderful moment.
That's great. And so if the situation does not get solved at the advocate level, then because Disability Rights Florida is a legal organization, we can bring in our attorneys to work with the advocates to basically do process hearings, administrative hearings. They, challenge things with the Department of Education based on federal law. And, it's interesting because some of the IEP team staff will say to me, you don't know what you're talking about. We follow the Department of Education policies and procedures. I'm like, we are familiar with all of those too, but we follow federal law, and federal law trumps state law. So, the idea, which is Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, that was established is there so that kids are given a free, appropriate public education. So if they're denying certain evaluations, okay, if they're denying these transition services or occupational therapy, physical therapy, a one-to-one para, okay, in the classroom, okay, a board-certified behavior analyst, that's a denial of faith. If any of that is happening for you, please call us. We want to help you. We want to help the student because everyone can achieve it. It's just the schools, they don't want to do the extra work and they don't want to pay the money. And so we're holding them accountable for that. And we've done very well with that. Yes?
I have the children come to the IEP meetings since I started from the beginning. And I had a 5-year-old. One time she's sitting in the IEP meeting and the speech teacher said that she sees her X amount of times, and the little voice hollered out, I don't see the speech teacher. And then the speech teacher admitted that she didn't go all the time because she's got meetings and stuff. And Warwick Valley School District, I took them to due process hearings. A lot of kids. We went for neuropsychological and acute EEG brain mapping. It's 1996, 97, something like that. And while we were there, we found out that none of the kids were getting speech therapy. So they not just had to pay for the neuropsych and the Q, but they also had to pay for speech therapy during the summer for about 40 kids. They had to offer, because what they did offer originally was that they would double up in the spring, in the fall. And I said, no, you'll give it during the summer and then you'll increase during the fall too. And that's what they did. They had speech therapy for 8 weeks during the summer and provided transportation and everything. Because the big issue is we call them in partial hearings, and you basically have to. I wish in the state of Florida we had attorneys that stood behind us, and we had parents go to due process. In New York, we took down the hearing system. Our hearing officers, we used to have only about 8 or 10 of them that did all the hearings. So we put in a rotational list. We used to have the Commissioner of Ed as a second tier. We took him down because you had a 5% chance working with him. In the due process hearings, we had a 1% chance outside of the 5 boroughs of New York City and a 17% chance in New York City. So we changed like I said, we got a rotational list, and we got the state review officer, and that was back in '92. In Florida, we have administrative law judges.
Sorry,
Yeah.
just going on to the next
Okay.
slide. I want to hear more about New York and everything, but maybe we can talk after.
That's
Just
all right.
because I have some more slides to finish
Oh, I'm sorry, I
up
do
and
hearings
everything.
in Florida too.
Wonderful.
Yes, you don't, I get a lot of the people who you reject and don't have the finances to do,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, thank you for the hard work that you do. It's very hard
Somebody's
work.
gotta do it.
That's true.
So,
Okay, so resilience. It doesn't matter how high your score was on the ACE questionnaire. Okay? You can still become resilient. You can come back. You can rise above the trauma that you've experienced and be very, very happy, productive, successful. So what is resilience? It's the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress. It's not a trait that people either have or do not have. It involves behaviors, thoughts, and actions that can be learned and developed in anyone. Okay? This is really important because who I am today, standing up in front of you, seeming all full of confidence, and speaking and everything, this isn't who I always was. It's taken years and years of work, prayer, and hope and faith, really. And it's also taken a good support system, people who believe in you, and people who want you to be you. Okay, regardless, we all have flaws. None of us are perfect. But there's some individuals that go through the different traumas that we've talked about, and it's harder for them. Okay? It's particularly hard for individuals in the poor communities. Because if you think about mothers that want to take their children to the clinic or to a therapist appointment, but they have to pay for the bus, okay? They only have so much money, and they have to make a decision. Am I going to pay the light bill, or am I going to pay for the bus and miss some time off work to take my kids to the clinic? I gotta pay the light bill, okay? Because if I don't pay the light bill, we can't see. All the food in the refrigerator will go bad. My kids won't be able to watch television, work on any of their devices, charging them. I mean, when you don't have electricity, it's really, really difficult. So often what happens in the clinics and the community health centers, and I know this because I've worked there, is the staff will blame the parent. Oh, they're a no-show, Again, they didn't come, they don't want to do the work, they don't care. That's not true, not at all. They're not walking in that person's shoe. They don't know what it's like to have to make that type of decision. And the majority of the time, it falls on the mother's shoulders. And they are strong, single heads of the households. Let's go to the next one. I don't even know. Okay, so to build resilience, make connections. Make connections. How do you make connections, and how do you make good connections, healthy connections? Well, if you're like me, you had to learn the hard way and make a lot of unhealthy connections to get to the healthy ones. And sometimes something has to happen in your life where you basically reach your bottom and you have to rely on people to help you. I was always, one second, I see you. I was always one when I was growing up to be like, I can do it. I can do everything. I don't really need anybody's help, okay? Like, I can pray, but as far as asking for help, that was very, very difficult for me. And then when I went through some very difficult experiences and people came in and said, would you like our help? And I said, yeah, I need it. I need your help. And I started advocating for myself and asking for what I needed. And it was hard at first, but it really, really helped me and helped me to become more confident in advocating for myself and speaking up for myself. Yes?
I don't know if you even know the answer to this, but like I have grandkids in another state, but 15 and 16-year-olds, they've been through a lot of trauma, et cetera. They're still kind of going through some trauma, but I don't think they have the tools or the understanding to know how to help themselves. That may not come for years, but is there any particular approach or organization or any kind of therapy that you think is beneficial for kids who, like, they really don't want to open up? They're just, not in touch with their feelings, but they have a lot. They're starting to get into the juvenile justice system. It's a big mess, but they don't, I don't think, have the maturity to see this, this kind of thing ever happening. They feel hopeless.
Well, how old are they?
15 and 16.
15 and 16. Male, female?
Male.
Male. In what state?
Colorado.
Colorado, okay. So are they into outdoor activities?
Yeah, I think that right now they're actually under the umbrella of guardian ad litem and people in human services.
Mm-hmm.
They may even, hopefully not going to go to foster care.
Okay.
But they need people involved. So we're trying, and when I'm out there, I'm trying to get some people rounded up who will help the family by connecting and helping these kids
What I have found,
get outdoors. Or
yeah,
whatever.
what I have found in social services and working with all the community work that I have done is that a lot of times people in these facilities will refer people. They'll say, oh, why don't you call this organization and they'll help you with that. Why don't you do this and they'll help you with that. But they never follow up to see if the family actually, or the kids actually got there. So when I worked in those places, I did the legwork. I did the groundwork. I would drive around the community, I would read, I would do all the research, Google and everything on what was going on around there that usually was free, because there are a lot of free things going on in communities that no one even thinks of, okay? Parks and recreation. There are art painting classes. There are, whatever their interests are, if somehow they can get involved in that, because often they will meet someone, usually an adult or a young adult, which is very, very, anyone that they can relate to and that may be a mentor to them. And over time, they just are doing, music is a great way to connect, music therapy. Art therapy, arts and crafts, is just work on that for a long time until that child, that teenager, opens up. If you're just thinking you're gonna bring them in and do talk therapy, no. I mean, it's, you know, I wouldn't wanna open up to a stranger like that. But if you can find out what their interests are and then sometimes we gotta do the work ourselves because you can't rely on these agencies. And also the staff turnover in many of these agencies is so quick because they don't pay very well, that there's no consistency. And that's really hard too. It's not the best answer, but it's an answer.
Thank you.
Okay, so is it me or is that kind of like?
It's not, it's
Okay. Avoid seeing crises as insurmountable problems. Often, something will happen in our lives and it's like, oh my gosh, like, you know, I have a flat tire. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna miss work. I'm not gonna get paid. I can't pick up my kids. I can't do this. I can't do that. And then we just fall apart. But if we slow down, which is very hard to do at times, but step by step by step, okay? This happened to me a few months ago because I rode over a pothole and my entire front tire went into it and went flat like that. And I was on my way to work, and so luckily I called the AAA club, and they came, and then I have like a locking lug nut thing to get the tire off, and I couldn't find the unlocking thing, and it was a lot of stress, but it wasn't an insurmountable problem because I tried to break down all the stress I was feeling into little steps. So that is a way to build some of that resilience. Accept that change is a part of living. The only thing that we know for sure is change is always going to happen. Always. Just when you think that something is going to stay, say something was really, really good, something may change. Okay? You just kind of get used to that. Move towards your goals, and sometimes we get sidetracked from our goals because unexpected things come up in life. A big part that's unexpected in life is health. Sometimes things happen. You can be here 1 minute and leave and you get in a car accident, okay? And your life changes forever. Or some health problem comes up that you never thought you would ever have to face. And that changes your life forever too. So you can get sidetracked, but you can still keep your eye on the goal. Take decisive actions. A lot of times, and this is for me too, is that I have like an idea in my mind of something I want to do. And then I'm just like, okay, well, I'll get to that, when I have more time and this and that. Sometimes I just need to make a decision. Like, I'm going to dedicate the time to this because I want to achieve this goal. Look for opportunities for self-discovery. Have you ever put yourself into a situation on purpose because it's uncomfortable for you? Like, you force yourself to do that? Does anyone want to share something?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, on something like that, you kind of find out that the situation will change. It can flip on you, turn from a negative thing into a blessing.
That's right.
You never know.
You never know.
You never know. I mean, what might seem, well, listen to the little voice in your head, okay, whichever belief system you got. Okay, chances are it's pretty right. Okay, well, we were talking the last 2 days, and the little voice told me, Dave, if you don't go to that session, I'm going to break your legs. Which, that's a problem. It could be a problem. There's a sidebar that I'm like going to go through it, but you've been surprised what to make seem uncomfortable at the time.
Mhm.
Well, the previous session, it was a youth thing, and I just had, the bug in my ear. It wasn't a voice or anything like that, And I learned something, I contributed something. You'd be surprised how it can change
Right.
for you.
Yes.
What might seem uncomfortable, take a leap of faith. The word picture there is the Indiana Jones thing.
Mhm.
Okay, everybody knows the movie, right? He
Mhm.
took a leap of faith, and next thing you know, he's finding the old crusader. Boy, anyway. Yeah, the thoughts are abounding here. But you'd be surprised what that one little leap of faith will do.
I agree, and I like to say, turn a setback into a comeback. And thank you for sharing that. And I'm only going to go through this because I know we're nearing the end. Nurture a positive view of yourself. Okay. Sometimes that's very hard, especially we as women. At least, I don't know, maybe men experience that too, but it's for women, often it's like, we're comparing ourselves, often because society has like this idea of what a perfect body looks like, or this and that. Acceptance of ourselves is huge. And when we can accept ourselves and our flaws, that can be an epiphany. It really, really can. And then the little stuff really doesn't matter as much. Keep things in perspective. Like when my car broke down and it cost me so much money to get that tire and front end fixed, I had to keep it in perspective. I could have let it really, really upset me. And one second. But I thought, you know what? I am so blessed in so many other ways. This is just a little inconvenience, really. Yes.
2 rules. All stuff is small, don't sweat the small stuff.
That's right. Very good. They had a
All
book
stuff is
called
small,
that too.
and don't sweat the small stuff.
Yes. Thank you. Maintain a hopeful outlook. If nothing else, having hope, okay, is huge. We may not know where to start, but if we can just have a little hope that something positive may happen, that is a great start. And take care of yourself. Pamper yourself. Something that I don't know if you all saw, is it Bill Klein that spoke this morning? Is that his name? How at the end of his talk, he really talked about being more present and really taking time to not do tasks and things that you have to do, but just take the family to the park and just be. And he and his wife just spend some quality time together without the phones. That's something very important too, is let's turn the phones over, unless people, we have to have them and to stay in contact in case of emergency or something like that, but it can be very distracting to a conversation, especially when you're trying to connect with one another. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we've reached the end of the presentation. Go on to the next one if you don't mind. Okay, so this is the 800 number is at the end of the handout. You call our intake line, okay, and if you need any assistance with anything else, and know too that Disability Rights Florida, even though I was just talking about more of the education sides of things, we work with people with all disabilities. Anything related to service animals, anything related to wheelchair access. There was a project that we did probably, I think it was like 5 years ago, where someone had reported that there wasn't an accessibility ramp at every Amtrak station in the state. So we went out to every single one. And basically, legally, we're able to handle some things with them, and then they had to put those in. So that is something that is so exciting to me working for Disability Rights Florida, because I've always worked for government agencies, nonprofit agencies, and you have specific rules and protocols that people are supposed to follow, and agencies are supposed to follow that are in partnership with them, but you can't really make it happen. With law, you can. And that's very exciting with Disability Rights Florida, and we've just been working on some really, really good cases and good projects, and please, if you aren't aware of them, please sign up for our newsletter. There's a paper in the back, and we will get that out to you. We recently hired a new CEO for our company, and there's some exciting things happening. We are updating our website and making it much more interactive with podcasts and different things that are going on. So just check us out.
Thank you.
And thank you all very much for your attention, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.